James Arness stood at 6 feet 7 inches. He was basically one of the tallest men to ever appear in film. On the set of Gunsmoke, this man towered over everyone. Yet many of his cast members often described him as a truly gentle giant. Imagine how shocked fans were when rumors of James not getting along with someone in his inner circle began to spread. In this video, let's look at the rise of James to fame and how true this rumor of hate was. James Aurness was born of Norwegian heritage to Rolf Cirkler Arness, a traveling medical supplier, and Ruth Dusler Arness, a journalist of German descent, on May 26, 1923, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The family name initially was Aurness. James's grandfather, Peter Aurness, had migrated to America from Norway in 1887, and then he changed the name to Arness. James was named James King Aurness at birth. He was from a believing Methodist background. This helped in shaping his beliefs, character, and personality. He is the eldest of 2 sons, and his younger brother, Peter Graves, was also an actor who adopted their maternal family name, Graves, as his stage name. James attended 3 schools in Minneapolis. He started out with John Burroughs Elementary School, proceeded to Washburn High School, and later transferred to West High School, where he graduated in 1942. Throughout high school, James always missed classes because he had to work part-time as a courier for a jewelry wholesaler. James was often busy packing and unpacking trains at the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad Freight Yard in Minneapolis, even logging in Pierce, Idaho to make ends meet. Though his parents were working, he had to help support the income flow into the home. What seemed like a happy family fell apart in the early 1940s when his parents divorced. The reason for the divorce is unknown, and this was heartbreaking for little James. James had always dreamed of being a fighting naval pilot, but saw his poor eyesight and height as a hindrance. He was 6 feet 7 in, and the maximum height for an aviator was 6 feet 2 in. Additionally, he weighed about 235 pounds. And his actual body measurements, which were in the following proportions. Chest, waist, hip were 48-36, 26 inches. Therefore, he never made an attempt to realize his dream as a young man. Well, since there wasn't a way to achieve his dreams, he decided to pursue higher education. After graduating from high school, he was enrolled in Beloit College that same year. But it seemed the military saw his potential through some special universe connection, because after enrolling in his new school, where he only attended lectures for a semester, he was called into the U.S. Army in 1943. He immediately reported to Fort Snelling in Hennepin County, Minnesota, in March of the same year. He started training at Camp Wheeler, Georgia, before setting out for North Africa, specifically Casablanca, almost a year later for the invasion of Anzio. It should be noted that the Battle of Anzio took place during the Second World War. James landed on Anzio beachhead on January 22, 1944, as a rifleman with the 2nd Platoon, E Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment of the 3rd Infantry Division. This fort was a primary center for the government officials. James, a very tall man, was, unsurprisingly, the first person to get off the landing craft to determine the depth of the water, and it came up to his waist. Before long, the new recruits were thrown into the action of things and would be fighting for months after. One moonless night on February 1, 1944, James was crawling through a garden toward the enemy lines when he was shocked by the sounds of screams. Before he could react, a battle had suddenly began, and he was caught. He was shot, repeated by machine gun fire, which fractured his lower leg. While trying to deal with the searing pain, a concussion grenade was thrown nearby. It lifted James off the ground and slammed him against something hard. Disoriented, the battle raged on, unconcerned as to whether James was dead or alive. Eventually, the enemy troops were defeated. But in the course of the battle, James was terribly injured. He had been shot multiple times in his right leg with a German machine gun. It was so bad that he had to be transported from Italy to the U.S. to receive treatment. On getting to the U.S., he was admitted to 91st General Hospital in Clinton, Iowa. It would take him a while before he could make a full recovery. The Anzio War lasted for 5 months and was resolved after several disputes, leaving behind many deaths and casualties. And James was just one of the lucky ones. After undergoing several surgeries, he was honorably discharged from the Army on January 29, 1945. His military decorations included the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the American Campaign Medal, the European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 3 bronze battle stars and arrowhead device, the World War II Victory Medal, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. He didn't totally recover and suffered from chronic leg pain that often became acute. During his stay in the hospital, his younger brother Peter visited him and encouraged him to apply for a radio course at the University of Minnesota. After his discharge from the hospital, James took his brother's advice and enrolled in a radio course at the University of Minnesota. He was soon recommended for a job by his teacher as an announcer at a Minneapolis radio station. Everything was going well for him as a radio announcer, but thankfully, a friend of his suggested that he go to Hollywood to work as a film extra, which he did. James actually hitchhiked to Hollywood with just a $100 bill in his pocket. James soon enrolled at the Bliss Hayden Theater School. During his time there, he studied under actor Harry Hayden. On a certain day, while he was rehearsing a play, he was spotted by Agent Leon Lance. Let's not forget that James was 6'7" in tall, with golden white hair and light brown eyes. He was certainly going to stand out. Whether Lance saw potential in him for his acting skills or for his eye-catching stature, no one really knows. What we do know is that he gave James the role of Loretta Young's brother, Peter Young, in the 1947 movie Farmer's Daughter. It was during this classic that H.C. Potter, who was at the time the director of the film, told James to drop the U from his last name. James clearly saw the sense in this and dropped the U from his name and became officially known as James Arness. This was the second time his grandfather's name would be altered. However, it seemed to work well for his career, and we are not aware of any drawbacks to using his former name. At this time, James was just rolling with the waves, literally. He lived on the shore at Onofre and spent his time surfing. However, a change was about to happen, which would change his life. James, for the first time in his life, received a fan mail shortly after the release of The Farmer's Daughter. This gesture greatly surprised him and inspired him to begin taking his acting career much more seriously, and his efforts began to pay off. He was cast in the production of Candida at the Pasadena Community Playhouse, where he met and later married his leading lady, Virginia Chapman, in 1948. This proved to be a great move for him, not just maritally, but for his career too. Encouraged him to study acting and put more effort into pursuing the career. One can't really fault James for not putting much effort into learning acting in the first place. He had never been interested in acting, even when he had acted in a few roles back in high school. He just never thought highly of the acting career, and he believed that he was only lucky to have gotten the roles he had been given so far. However, it didn't matter what he believed. He started receiving other mini-roles to act in, and this was soon becoming frequent. Of course, the fact that he had a gigantic stature played a fantastic role in getting him jobs, especially villainous roles. Two of the most well-known ones were science fiction movies. 1951. The Thing from Another World, where he played the role of a killer alien, and he was in them too. Eventually, someone must have looked at James and felt he had more to offer than to keep being the bad guy in movies. So one day, he was given the role of a Greek warrior, and while playing that role, he was spotted by Agent Charles K. Feldman, who was also representing John Wayne. Mind you, John Wayne was already a huge star at the time. Feldman introduced James to Wayne, and for some reason Wayne liked James, perhaps because of the unique combination of his personality and huge stature. Anyways, before anyone could say jack, Wayne signed James on a personal contract. He received the privilege of working as an actor in a lot more varied roles under Wayne for a few years. It was to be expected that James would put Wayne in the position of a mentor, and this would help James tremendously. Not just in getting much better at acting, but in getting bigger jobs. One of his career-defining jobs would eventually land on his laps in 1955, when Wayne recommended him for the lead role of Matt Dillon in the TV series Gunsmoke. This debunked the rumor that was floating around Hollywood, claiming that the role was initially offered to Wayne, who turned it down. But that is not true. It was James who actually turned down the role because he felt starting on a TV series would force his career off the growth trajectory he was focused on. But thankfully, His friend and mentor, who sought to see him succeed, would not let him pass up such a great opportunity. Wayne is reported to have said, "Go ahead and take it, Jim. You're too big for pictures. Guys like Gregory Peck and I don't want a big lug like you towering over us. Make your mark in television." So, finally, he agreed and took the role. In fact, his dedication was quite applaudable. He even had to dye his naturally blonde hair darker for the role. He also had to learn how to shoot, to make the scenes much more realistic. Even though Wayne showed up in the prologue to the pilot episode of Gunsmoke in 1955, in which he introduced James as Matt Dillon, the protagonist of the show, he wasn't going to be a major part of the series itself. The show was set in Dodge City, Kansas. It focused on Marshal Matt Dillon's efforts to uphold law and order in an unpredictable frontier setting. Viewers were captivated by this compelling story, which captivated audiences worldwide. Dillon served as an effective enforcer, and his peculiar group of friends were endearing characters that made the show even more entertaining. Among those James would work with was Arvo Ohala. Arvo was one of the first of several actors in the show's opening. It was here that Dillon was going to have a shootout with what is described as a generic bad guy, representing all those whom he must deal with in the long course of the show. Arvo had taken on the responsibility of teaching James how to shoot. James played the role of Dillon to a brilliant perfection. Soon the country couldn't get enough of him. He had won the hearts of Americans. Gunsmoke had become a favorite among the Americans in its very first season. This was funny because this same TV series lasted for 20 seasons between 1955 and 1975, and up until 2008, it was still the longest-running dramatic series in U.S. television history. It, however, remains one of the longest-running series ever. The truth is, Gunsmoke made James and his co-stars, including Milburn Stone, Amanda Blake, Burt Reynolds, Dennis Weaver, Ken Curtis, and Buck Taylor, very popular. While he was married to Virginia Chapman, he adopted her son, Craig Arness. Craig Arness later became the founder of the stock photography agent West Light and worked as a photographer for National Geographic. They also had a son and daughter together. His son was named Rolf Arness, birthed on February 18, 1952, and his sister Jenny Lee Arness, birthed on May 23, 1950. In 1963, after his divorce from Virginia Chapman, James fought for and got legal custody of his children. In 1968, he gave away his 400-acre ranch in northern Los Angeles County to the Brandes Institute. Rolf later rose to fame as a world surfing champion in 1970. Unfortunately, Jenny Lee died at the young age of 25 after an overdose of cocaine. It can be said she committed suicide in 1975. 2 years later, another unfortunate incident broke James's heart. It was reported that his ex-wife Virginia later died of an accidental drug overdose in 1977. 4 years after his divorce from Virginia Chapman, he met Thordis Brandt. They befriended for 6 years, but their relationship ended. In 1978, then he met and married Janet Surtees. On the set of Gunsmoke, James was having a great time. According to a report, Gunsmoke cast members' strong bonds serve as evidence that strong personal relationships have an immense positive influence over franchise success. They were known for creating an enjoyable working environment on set that resulted in opportunities. James himself was such a great person. In fact, his Gunsmoke stunt double, Ben Bates, said, "Despite the seriousness of his character in Gunsmoke, James laughed, from his toes to the top of his head. It was so often that filming on set was sometimes stopped simply because of his uncontrollable burst of laughter." To show how much James was held in high esteem on the show, one of the new actors on the set of Gunsmoke's Buck Taylor respected James so much that he named his second son after James's character Matt. Another reason why James was respected is probably because he was extremely shy and very sensitive. And because that was his nature, he found it difficult to suck up to the media. In fact, it is said that he disliked the media show-off so much that he actually banned reporters from the Gunsmoke set. James was literally a simple man who valued poetry, yacht racing, surfing, and real human connection above all else. This earned him the name the Greta Garbo of Dodge City. And fortunately for him, he met people who had the same values on set, which is why both the actors and non-actors on set were like a big family. It was one of the reasons the show had longevity. During the 20 seasons that Gunsmoke was aired, it featured its lead character in each of its 20 seasons. It was in the top 10 in the ratings for 13 seasons, spending 4 consecutive seasons at number 1. The series' season record was tied in 2010 with the final season of Law & Order, and tied again in 2018 with Season 20 of Law & Order, Special Victims Unit. While the series was on, James received raises every year during this time and obtained greater creative authority over the show with earnings and residuals. Interestingly, at some point along the timeline of the show, his own firm was produced by his firm. James was the only one of the original 4 major actors to continue appearing on Gunsmoke beyond the show's end in 1975. After the show got canceled, James wanted a simpler life. From the time he was young, he had a burning desire to wander, but his contract with Gunsmoke had him close to Hollywood for almost 20 years. Definitely, this was the time to go and experience the wanderlust of his childhood. But this was not to be for James, at least not yet. Hollywood wanted him back on the screens. He was in 1976's The Mac-a-Hand, which resulted in the 6-hour miniseries. Then the following year, he did How the West Was Won, which became a single-season weekly series in 1978. He was also in The Island in the Sky and the Sea Chase, Gun the Man Down, a fast-paced Western, for Wayne's production company. He did some more Wayne-involved movies like a 1988 TV remake of Wayne's 1948 classic Red River, taking up Wayne's role as Tom Dunson. James went on to do a lot more movies than he initially imagined he would do, or more sincerely, didn't imagine he would do. Surprisingly, for someone who wasn't taking acting seriously, he had incredible talent. His fans and the movie industry were incredibly grateful for it. The awards themselves speak to his skill. He was nominated for these Emmy Awards: 1957, Best Continuing Performance by an Actor in a Dramatic Series; 1958, Best Continuing Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role in a Dramatic or Comedy Series; 1959, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Continuing Character, in a Dramatic Series. So much so was his to television that he even received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1751 Vine Street. In 1981, he was inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. James was inducted into the Santa Clarita Walk of Western Stars in 2006. During the 50th anniversary of television in 1988 in the United States, People magazine ranked top 25 television stars of all time, and James was ranked number 6. TV Guide also ranked him number 20 among its 50 greatest stars of all time. James wrote and released an autobiography in September 2001, and he said, "If I was going to write a book about my life, I better do it now, 'cause I'm not getting any younger." He was made an honorary U.S. Marshal in recognition of his unique contribution to the image and traditions of the U.S. Marshal Service. On February 6, 2005, the mayor, the 15 members of the city council, and the city attorney presented him with a resolution in Los Angeles City Hall that recognized his career as an actor and his 60 years of Los Angeles residency. The brilliant resolution featured an image of a U.S. Marshal's badge and paid homage to his portrayal of Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, 1955, which ran for more than 20 years and was the longest-running drama series on television. It also recalled his heroism during World War II and thanked him for leaving us with one of the most telling and realistic portraits ever created of the brave, tall man in the saddle who tames a Western town as he searches for justice and peace. Even James called it the most wonderful day in his life, and says the resolution was immediately framed and in a very obvious place in his home. On June 3, 2011, James passed away at the age of 88 in his Brentwood home in Los Angeles due to a natural cause. In the sanctuary of Abiding Hope alcove His remains were buried in the Jasmine Terrace part of the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. His spouse, a son, 6 grandchildren and great-grandchildren survived him. Looking at the life this legendary actor, it is clear that he understood the privilege of human connection, seeing how they played an incredible role in getting him to a significant position his life, right on to his end. Now, to address the rumor of hate, we will have to start from those who spent the most time with him during his career. From what we gather, the cast of Gunsmoke, to a high percentage, enjoyed working together and got along pretty easily. Of course, there were conflicts and occasional differences on set, but these were easily dealt with quickly. And again, no one individual could be held accountable for starting trouble. It was basically impossible, since cast members of Gunsmoke even got in to socialize outside of filming. The on-screen chemistry translated to real life. If this was not so, 20 seasons and 635 episodes released over a 20-year run would not have been possible if these issues were not quickly addressed and settled amicably. These guys formed very close bonds that even after the show was canceled, many people on set remained very close friends. The only other rumor that stood out was that James hated his brother Peter Graves, perhaps for changing his name completely or living home early. But all of those reasons are basically unfounded. James left home early. Peter changed his name because he wanted to achieve success independently from his elder brother, something James fully understood since he had to change his own name too to suit demand. Then rumor mongers to forget that Peter directed an episode of Gunsmoke in 1955, with James being the lead, and that same year James was nominated for an Emmy. James clearly hated no one. And if there was one thing the gentle giant hated, it was to be forced to influence people's personal decisions. As he said, "Because I am not an authority, I keep my mouth shut. I don't think I have the right to influence others." Maybe that being a dropout. I don't know. No.